Hello once more, and welcome to the EUROSTUDENT Talks webinar. As you probably already noticed and heard, we are recording this session, so feel free to share this later with your colleagues or people who you think could be interested in it. Usually my colleague Marlene is here to greet you, but today, as she couldn't be here, it's a great opportunity for me to host the EUROSTUDENT Talks webinar. My name is Eve Mägi, and I'm a colleague of Marlene's, and I also work in think tank Praxis in Estonia, and we are also together in the EUROSTUDENT Consortium. We are very happy today to have Marcel Kiss as our speaker. And Marcel Kiss joined the Department of Higher Education Analysis at the Education Authority of Hungary in January 2024. He holds a master's degree in sociology from Corvinus University of Budapest. He has been involved in various national projects and surveys such as EUROSTUDENT and EUROGraduate. And he's here today to share the results of what is the Hungarian students' time budget like. So welcome, Marcel, and the floor is yours. We are very excited to hear the results.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Yes, so hello everyone. Good morning. My name is Marcel Kiss, and I must say that it is a great pleasure to be here because since January I've been also attending the EUROSTUDENT Talks. So it's nice to be here, not just as a viewer and a listener, but also a presenter. Hopefully there is not going to be any technical difficulties, but if anything you can't hear or see me well, please do let me know. I will try my best to fix it. And hopefully now you can see my slides. Yes, so as mentioned before, today I am going to talk about the time usage of Hungarian university students based on the results from the EUROSTUDENT 9 survey that was conducted in Hungary. And before starting, I will quickly show the outline that we're going to have today. First, I will say a few introductory words, a little bit of a contextualization for today, the relevance of the research and why is it important to talk about these matters, as well as the sample that we were using in the Hungarian EUROSTUDENT survey. Afterwards, we will take a look at some characteristics of full-time and part-time university students, again, based on, of course, the EUROSTUDENT results. This will include descriptive statistics, demographics, etc. And up next, we will see the actual time budgeting and the patterns of their time usage with a particular focus on the study time inside and outside of the university. But of course, directly and very strictly related, the time usage of the students is participating in paid labor force. So there's going to be an emphasis on that too. And prior to actually finishing the presentation and potentially answering your questions, we will take a look at some graphs and questions regarding online and offline education, the preferences, digital skills of the students. So for introduction, I think it is pretty obvious that if a stakeholder is to shape the policies, the curriculum, the class schedules, or develop any supporting policies or services, they must take a look at time use data of their students. So it is pretty crucial to take a thorough look at the time use data of students. And from previous EUROSTUDENT waves, we also know that the ratio of those students who are participating in paid labor work is on a constant increase. And we do know that it has a beneficial side in terms of monetary compensation, of course, and working while also studying can provide a great opportunity to gain relevant labor market experience, which can help find a job easier in a competitive labor market. But it is also true, and we can also see from statistics and other EUROSTUDENT research, is that participating in paid labor force, the intensity of the studies and the time spent on studying, these are inversely related variables. So if you spend too much time in participating in paid labor force, you may be at a greater risk of dropping out which is important to remember. And of course, I believe that we've all been there with the pandemic. Unfortunately, in the post-COVID era, the question of online education, digital tools, is basically inevitable to conduct research on, and it gives a great relevance because this pandemic basically forced an overnight shift to online education, and digital tools were essential in doing so. Particularly knowing that higher educational institutions were traditionally not heavily focused on online educational solutions, or not entirely. They were particularly keen on using in-person classes, so they had to solve the problems of online communication, organizing remote work conditions. And also, it is not listed here, but obviously we are in the era of digitalization in terms of like artificial intelligence. It's a very hot topic, so there is no wonder that we need to focus on this issue as well. A few words about our actual sample. The EUROSTUDENT 8 Hungarian sample included nearly 15,000 individuals, and the surveying period lasted from the 2nd of May 2022 until the same year, 15th of June. And those who responded to our call had the opportunity to fill out our survey that was compiled in Lime survey, and this was an online questionnaire that we sent out to students. And some technical terminology and like the clarification of full-time and part-time students in Hungary. I think we like it is important to have a few sentences about this. In the whole of our sample, 76% of them were full-time students, while the remaining 24% respectively were part-time students. But what does a part-time student actually mean in Hungary? So in a part-time program, we included those who are partaking in a correspondence training, evening training, or in distance learning format. And as we will see later on, part-time students have different time usage, and also like participation in paid labor force as compared to full-time students. This is particularly true for the class schedules. But before actually seeing the time budgeting of them, let's see some characteristics. First, starting with the level of study of full-time and part-time students, and also their age distribution. As you can see on the left-hand side, full-time students are mostly found in undivided programs such as like law or medicine, while part-time students can be found in master's program and also higher education, vocational training in the most amount of times. Another crucial difference that we can see is on the right-hand side if we compare the age cohorts and the distributions. On the first line, we can see that 46% of full-time students are up to 21 years old, indicated in the bar, the blue bars. And another almost 40%, 37% of them is between 22 and 25. And the remaining categories indicated in the gray and also in the yellow are quite marginal as compared to the previous two categories. And the contrast is very clear if we see the next bar with the part-time students, because 55% of them indicated in the yellow are actually above 30 years old, and another third of them, 29% of them, is between 25 and 30 years old. So you can see that full-time students are much more likely to be younger compared to part-time students, and the contrast is very clear with the colors as well. But it is also important to see the distribution between the field studies and the parents' highest level of education. So as mentioned before, in the whole sample, 76% of them, of the students who filled out the questionnaire, are full-time students, while the remaining 24% are part-time students. And the field of study distribution here is just a technical note that this classification is slightly different than our national classification, but nevertheless, the statistics are, of course, correct. So part-time students are mostly found in the field of education, business administration, and law, but also agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and veterinary. While full-time students, as you can see, almost in an overwhelming majority, for example, can be found in natural sciences, mathematics, statistics, health and welfare. And on the right-hand side, you can also see the parents' highest level of education. This graph was created by taking in each case the highest level of education for the parent. So in each case, we compare the mother's and the father's education, and whichever was highest, we took as the parent's highest level of education. And again, you can see a difference when it comes to full-time and part-time students, because for full-time students, parents' highest level of education, in almost 60% of the cases, this was a university degree, as indicated by the yellow bar, and 35% of them had the highest level of education as a secondary school diploma. And if you compare this to the part-time students, you can see the story looks a little bit different, because for 35% of them, their parents' highest level of education was actually university diploma, as compared to almost 60% with full-time students. And for secondary school education, it's 55 compared to 35. So you can see that there's a notable difference in this department as well. Another important aspect of student life and an important slide here is the place of residence and the amount of times it takes for the students to go into the university or the higher education facility. So on the left-hand side, you can see that first the place of residence. For part-time students, in 71% of the cases, they are either living at their own or their parents' property. Another 33% of them live in a rented apartment, and you can see the remaining, well, you actually can't really see, but this case, it's not a coincidence. The dormitory and the other category are quite marginal as compared to the previous two categories. And this difference is very very apparent, especially in the case of dormitory, if you think about full-time students, because for them, 25% of them live in a dormitory. And for part-time students, it's basically a non-existing category. But you can also see the difference between living in an own or their parents' property and also in a rented apartment. There is somewhat of a difference. Another major aspect that they are differing is the amount of time it takes for them to go to the university. Here I would like to emphasize the two categories on the, so to say, extremes. So for part-time students, 18% of them take on the maximum 15 minutes of commuting to get to university. And for full-time students, it's 30%. So there is a huge difference. And what is even more telling is the answer category that indicates that the student needs more than 60 minutes to go into the university. So for part-time students, it's 35%. And for full-time students, it's only 13%. Which in Hungary's case, it may include that part-time students are more likely to reside in actually a different city, most likely, judging by the amount it takes for them to go into the university as compared to full-time students. And now let us turn our attention to the actual patterns and time budgeting and time usage of these students. First, on this slide, you can see the amount of time they devote to tasks that are within the university, and you may wonder what within the university means. So in this slide, you can see the amount of times they devote to actually tasks that require them to physically go into the university. So basically attending lectures, seminars, lab practices, taking an exam, stuff like that. So on the left-hand side for full-time students, you can see that from Monday to Thursday, the answer categories are roughly distributed distributed very evenly. And there is a spike in on Friday in the ratio of those who do not devote any hours to tasks that require them to physically go into university. And of course, on weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, the overwhelming majority of full-time students do not have any responsibilities related to directly going into the university. And this is not shocking in the sense that it's not uncommon not to have any classes on Friday, or at least have substantially less classes or lectures as compared to other weekdays. What about part-time students? You can see it on the left, that it is actually a reverse trend, so to say, because from Monday until Thursday, they basically do not devote any, like the overwhelming majority of them do not need to go into physically to the university buildings and attend lectures, seminars, etc. However, on Friday and Saturday, we can see that their workload increases significantly when it comes to tasks that are directly linked to going into the university. And this is particularly true in the answer category that indicates that they devote more than 6 hours in doing so. Let's move on to the next slide. On this slide, a similar pattern, but I mean, a similar graphical design, but this time we are taking a look at tasks that are related to outside of the university. So basically individual preparation time for tasks that are still related to university, but they do not require them to go into the building itself. So like actually study time, preparing assignments, homework, preparing for a presentation, etc. And contrasting the full-time and part-time students, we can see here that full-time students generally devote more time to individual preparation as compared to part-time students. The ratio of those among full-time students who devote 0 hours for such activity is significantly lower compared to part-time students. And likewise for part-time students, the ratio of those who devote 3 to 6 hours a day during from Monday to Friday to actually individual preparation time is in each day is less than 10%. And you can see that for full-time students, it's a substantially higher proportion. But it is also important to note that whether you're a full-time or a part-time student, your individual preparation time increases on the weekend. However, for part-time students, with particularly in answer categories that are indicating higher workload, so for example, the yellow one with more than 6 hours, if you compare part-time as compared to full-time, their ratios are lower. And as mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the amount of students who also also participate in paid labor force is increasing. So, and it is heavily related to the patterns of time usage. So we will now turn our attention to the field of paid work. On the left-hand side, you can see the percentages of those who are working throughout the whole semester, working at least temporarily or did not work during the lecture period, based on various categories. On the first part, you can see that 27% of full-time students have worked throughout the whole semester, while 19% of them had at least a temporary employment, and 55% of them did not have any paid work. And quite apparently and quite visibly for part-time students, it's a vastly differing story. 90% of them worked, while only 6% indicated they did not have any paid work, which is why it's not that shocking or surprising that the questions that were related to how do they identify, whether they are identifying as a student who is also working or vice versa, a worker who is also studying, shows a very different picture for part-time and full-time students. You can see it on the right-hand side. So for part-time students, this question, in 93% of the cases, part-time students primarily identify as a worker who is also studying. And for full-time students, it's quite the opposite. It's 82% of them identify as a student who is also working. But it is also vital to notice that the 18% of full-time students actually regard themselves as a worker who is also studying, which is quite a large number actually. We will also see the actual average hours per week that they are devoting to paid work. First, on the left-hand side, you can see that for full-time students, on average, it's a little bit higher than 20 hours a week. And for part-time students, it's almost a full-time job. It's like a 40-hour work week. And these figures change a little bit if we also include the answer categories, whether they've been working the whole semester or they had just a temporary employment. You can see that regardless basically of the actual working, like whether they've been working the whole semester or just temporarily. The important takeaway message here is that part-time students devote more time to performing paid labor in each case. And on this slide, we can actually basically see a summary as what had been already said before regarding the amount of time students devote to taught studies, personal studying diet, so the individual preparation time, and also like performing paid work. I will not read aloud the whole chart. This is just to indicate or like highlight one notion, namely that there are certain groups of students who, regardless of whether they are working part-time or full-time, they have extreme amount of hours devoted to university and also performing paid labor workforce. So if you see, if again, whether you're a part-time student or a full-time student, if you devote more than 20 hours a week for performing paid labor, your workforce overall, like in workload overall, sorry, it can in some cases exceed 60 hours a week, which is very intense. And talking about intensity, on the left-hand side on this slide, you can see the intensity of studies, and this is only concerning the actual studying hours, so this is not including paid work. But on this chart, you can see that we have made a threefold classification based on the amount of hours that you devote to performing studying. So if you spend up to 20 hours a week, it was considered a low intensity study. Between 20 and 40 hours, it was a medium intensity study. And everything above 40 was considered a high intensity study. And again, indicated by the different colors, you can see that while the medium answer category is roughly balanced between being a full-time and a part-time student, the values and the, so to say, extremes are vastly differing for full-time and part-time students. And lastly, on the right-hand side, you can see that the students were prompted to answer, like rate whether this statement, like to what extent this statement applies for them, that they are experiencing difficulties in like coordinating the studies and also paid work. Whether this statement totally applies for them or does not apply to them at all. And the important thing to notice here is that essentially whether like there is no substantial grade differences whether they are full-time or part-time students. The bottom line is that coordinating studies and performing paid work can mean a great difficulty regardless of mode of study. And interestingly, the answer categories, whether they've been working more than 20 hours a week or up to 20 hours a week, the answer categories are not substantially differing. After talking about the amount of time the students spend on studying time and performing paid labor, now I will focus our attention to the questions that were related to online and offline educational solutions. So first, on the left-hand side, you can see the distribution of students based on whether they've been studying completely online or completely in person. As you can see, only 5% of our respondents indicated that they are completely studying in online mode. If I recall correctly, this is around 700 people, and the vast majority of them are, almost half of them, like 45% of them, are completely studying in person. If we look at the same question based on mode of study, like whether they've been studying full-time or part-time, we can spot a little bit of a difference. So part-time students were more likely to indicate that they have either completely online or more online components in their education as compared to full-time students. And besides the actual current ratio of their online and offline educational solutions, the questionnaire also included questions in terms of preferences for online and offline education. But you can see on the left-hand side. So it is clear that almost 40% of the respondents said that they would rather have in-person education, but it is also important to note that 26% of them said that they would rather study online. And the answer distribution for this question changes substantially. Again, if we look at this from the perspective of being a part-time or a full-time student. So you can see it on the right-hand side that 46% of part-time students indicated that they would rather have online education, and the same answer category is only 20.5% of the cases in full-time students. The questionnaire also included questions that were regarding the importance of digital skills in various aspects of life. We tried to spot differences between full-time and part-time students in this aspect as well, or in these questions, which I must say was not always a success, as you can see on the left-hand side. The importance of digital skills for studying, so basically at the university and also in their everyday life. The answer categories are very equally distributed between the full-time and part-time students. Both of them agree that it is rather important in both of these aspects. However, if we look on the right side at work, we can see that there have been some differences when it comes to the importance of digital skills regarded by full-time and part-time students. So what is crucial to note here that part-time students were more likely to evaluate the importance of digital skills rather important, indicated in on the right-hand side, like 86% of part-time students said that they are rather important compared to not even 70% by full-time students. And this is also true in the lowest answer category, rather not important. Last but not least, there were questions that required the respondents to rank their own digital skills from 1 to 5, and we have also classified these into they find their own digital skills rather sufficient, mediocre, or rather insufficient. And as you can see, besides the mode of study, so whether they are a part-time student or a full-time student, we also included gender and age categories, and we tried again to identify some patterns and some differences in terms of rating their own digital skills. But again, we can see that this is a very balanced sample in this question. There are no substantial differences between age groups and also like men and women, and basically no notable substantial differences whether they are a part-time or a full-time student. The overwhelming majority of students, regardless of any variables, regard their own digital skills as rather sufficient. And finally, before answering some of your potential questions, if there's any, I would like to do a small concluding remark and also recap what has been just said and emphasize the main differences between full-time and part-time students. As we could see in the beginning of the presentation, in Hungary, being a full-time or a part-time students differ greatly, especially when it comes to the patterns of time usage. When and how do they learn and how much they actually need to study and also actually go into the buildings of the university. So there are differences when it comes to the time spent on studying, but very, very importantly, also the amount of paid work that they are performing. Part-time students are more likely to be older, as we could see in the beginning of the presentation, and they're identifying primarily as workers and secondarily as students. I also remarked earlier that there are certain groups of students who are, so to say, at risk of overworking themselves or their workload is very intense. So just as a reminder, we are thinking about some future research directions that we could pursue that we believe would be very beneficial. So we would think that it would be important to focus on specific groups of students based on the study and work intensity, and maybe see if there's any association between the status of the mental health, or if there's any association between the intentions of dropping out, if they are at the risk of dropping out. Overall, we believe that it would be a beneficial and a fruitful route to explore these variables and see these specific groups of students in more in-depth in detail. And I believe that is all I have for today. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to try my best to answer them, but you can also see my email address. Feel free to reach out and we will hopefully able to reply more in detail. But yes, thank you so much for your attention. I think that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Marcel, for the very interesting presentation. We saw several graphs and interesting results. We are open for questions. You can ask them just here by opening your microphone, or you can also post your question to the chat where we can see it and we can read it ourselves. So if you have any questions or comments, then feel free right now. I can also start with one question. We saw some intense time budgeting among students. And if you think about the current ratio of online and offline students, and the relationship, or how is it related to the preference for online and offline students, then, for example, would those students with more online solutions, would they prefer more online studies? Or what can you say about the preferences?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we have looked at the preferences in terms of that too. And what we have found is that generally across like there were no substantial demands, so to say. Generally, students were roughly satisfied the current ratios. But we also spotted there is some more need for more online education among those who are also studying in more online ratios. So there is some need for more online solutions, but also what we could also see is that part-time students are somewhat more likely to look for more online education solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Silverman from IHS. Thank you very much for this great presentation. I think it is a great idea to look at part-time and full-time students with a different view and get a better grasp of how they organize their time. I was wondering, you were using the categorized time budget variable a lot, like less than 0 hour, less than 5 hours, more than 20 hours, and so on. Did you also have a look at the mean hours of the two different groups? Like overall, on average, how many hours they're spending on working and studying?
Thank you so much for the comment. And yes, our the whole section of our researches also include more in-depth statistics regarding that too. But I did not prepare a table for this presentation. But yes, we did check those values too.
Because I was curious while you were presenting, and so I started looking it up in the official database, and it is a huge difference. I think for full-time students overall the time is about 45 hours, and for part-time students it's up to 60 hours. That's a huge difference in overall workload they have here. So I think it's a good idea to have a closer look at that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you, Sylvia. You have Yannis who raised the hand. Can you hear us, or was...
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I was muted. Sorry.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
I was saying I wanted to say thank you to Marcel for the wonderful presentation he gave us. And I said that I don't know much about the Hungarian educational system. Are there private universities in Hungary? There must be, right?
I mean, we do have a financing. There are different financing. Either it is subsidized, or there is a chance to pay tuition fee.
I mean, I wanted to say, what about private universities? Does this situation exist also among students of private universities? So many students working and feeling overwhelmed by this burden they have to carry? Or are there no separate data for students of private universities?
Yeah, thank you so much for the comment. I understand what you mean. As far as I know, we do not have separate data for private and like public universities, or at least I haven't personally looked at them. But if any of my colleagues would like to beg to differ, please do so. But I believe that we don't have a data on that.
Okay, thanks.
So does any of the colleagues wish to comment or add something? No? Do we have more questions or comments? Listening to this, I have one more question actually. When you looked into this time budget, was there anything surprising for you too, or like you as researchers or researchers team? What was the most surprising study result, if you can think of any?
Well, for me, I would not say it was particularly surprising in the sense that it's like surprising in the sense that it's nice to see the, so to say, real life being backed up by the statistics. So we knew that there would be differences between full-time and part-time students, but for me personally, it was also nice to see that the data supports very much the, so to say, anecdotal evidence of being a full-time or a part-time student. So, but also the workload differences, like the patterns of individual preparation time being very much showing a different pattern between full-time and part-time students. I think it is also very interesting to take a look at that.
Thank you. We have time for some more comments or questions if anybody would like to say something or ask.
I would like to ask something.
Yes.
Eva. Do we have any data on how the situation, or if whether the situation has changed over the years. I mean, if there were more students working in the previous years. Do we know anything about that?
There is a section, like as I mentioned before, it was not included as a table. I do know that like we have a study that is covering previous waves of the EUROSTUDENT, and I know that the ratio of those who are actually working as a student has been increasing over the previous waves of EUROSTUDENT, but it was not included in the presentation. But there is an increasing tendency as far as I know.
Thank you, Marcel. Köszönöm.
Szívesen.
Yes, thank you. I think also probably in this EuroStudent internationally comparative database, it's probably possible to find out like these comparisons also, how and what kind of change has been happening in different EuroStudent rounds in different countries. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Thank you again, Marcel. It was very interesting, and as I mentioned, the link will be available as well to share with the colleagues who couldn't be present or with those who could be interested. And as always, there is already the next EuroStudent Talks webinar scheduled. So please save the date for the November 14th. And then the topic will be related a little bit to this time budget. It will be students' financial aid. And Marcel, thank you very much. Next time, Marlene will be back already, and then new topics, and hopefully you all can attend. Thank you very much, and see you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you too.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day, everyone.